What if a single touch in the dark could set fire to an entire kingdom? What if the strongest warrior, sworn to protect the princess, broke every vow and claimed not just her safety, but her body, her soul, and the secret desires she tried to hide? This is no ordinary fantasy. This is a tale where lips burn with hunger, where armor is stripped away in the shadows, and where every forbidden kiss is a rebellion against the crown. Protect the princess, the hidden warrior, a love so wild, so dangerous, it could destroy kingdoms or save them. Hello, beautiful hearts. Welcome back to the Snap of Two Hearts, the place where passion lives, where every heartbeat tells a story, and where love is written in fire and fantasy. Tonight, I want to take you deeper into a world of forbidden desire, intoxicating romance, and a bond that is as sensual as it is dangerous. If you believe in love that makes you tremble, if you crave romance that's both touching and wildly seductive, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Snap of Two Hearts, and leave a comment below. Tell me, should we continue this novel until the very last kiss? Your words shape this story, and your love keeps it alive. The night was cloaked in velvet darkness, the twin moons of Ardelis spilling silver light over the marble towers of the palace. Princess Alara leaned against the cold stone of her balcony, her silk gown slipping down one bare shoulder, exposing the delicate curve of her neck. She closed her eyes, the wind tugging at her hair, and whispered to the stars, "I wish just once someone would see me as more than a crown." A sound stirred the shadows behind her. She turned, and there he was, Kale, the hidden warrior. His broad shoulders caught the moonlight, his dark cloak billowing like midnight itself. She should have feared him, should have remembered he was only meant to guard her unseen, but the hunger in his eyes made her chest tighten. For weeks, Alara had felt his presence. Every time she walked the halls, every moment she wandered through the gardens, she felt his gaze burning against her skin. It wasn't just protection. It was something else, something dangerous. Tonight, as his footsteps echoed softly across her chamber, she didn't move away. Instead, her lips parted, and her pulse raced as he came closer. His gloved hand lifted, trembling before brushing her cheek. "Princess," he whispered, voice rough, almost broken, "if I touch you again, I will not be able to stop." She leaned into his palm anyway, her heart daring him. "Then don't stop," she breathed. The words shattered every barrier he had built. Their lips met in a rush, fire against fire. His mouth claimed hers, desperate, hungry, tasting of danger and longing. Alara gasped against him as his hand slid to her waist, pulling her against his armored chest. She had kissed men before, courtly dances, ceremonial gestures, but nothing like this. Kale kissed like a starving man who had finally found water, like a warrior who knew tomorrow was not promised. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, until she was pressed fully against him, her gown tangling in his belt. His tongue teased hers, slow and commanding, and her body melted with a moan that echoed into the night. He broke the kiss, only to trail his lips down her throat, leaving a path of fire that made her knees weaken. "Gods, Alara," he growled, his breath hot against her collarbone. "You don't know what you're doing to me." She tilted her head back, offering herself to him, her skin trembling beneath his mouth. "Then show me," she whispered, voice trembling with both fear and desire. He groaned, lifting her into his arms with effortless strength, carrying her to the bed draped in crimson silk. His armor clinked as he set her down, but then his hands were everywhere, undoing straps, sliding fabric, revealing skin inch by inch. Alara arched beneath his touch, her breath catching as his lips found the swell of her breast, sucking gently until she gasped his name like a prayer. Time ceased to exist. Kale's body covered hers, the weight of him grounding her as their passion spiraled out of control. His hands caressed every curve, every secret place that made her shudder. Her thighs wrapped around him, pulling him closer, until there was no space left between them. He moved with a hunger that spoke of years of restraint breaking all at once, every thrust of his hips against hers drawing a cry from her lips. "You are mine," he groaned, biting gently at her shoulder as she clung to him, nails digging into his back. Their bodies moved in rhythm, sweat and silk tangling, their cries mingling with the night breeze. When release came, it was like the heavens themselves cracked open, light and fire flooding through them, leaving them breathless, trembling, bound by something far deeper than flesh. The morning light spilled across the princess's chamber, soft and golden, as Alara stirred beneath the silken sheets. Her body still hummed with the memory of Kale's touch, her skin still marked with the bruising kisses he had left like secret signatures of devotion. She turned and found him seated at the edge of the bed, his shirt discarded, his powerful back tense as he laced his boots. His shoulders rose and fell with a quiet storm of restraint. She reached for him, fingers tracing the muscles of his back. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice husky with both tenderness and desire. Kale closed his eyes, fighting a battle no sword could win. "If anyone discovers us, Alara, it will mean my death." He turned, his face carved in anguish, yet softened by love. "I should leave now, before I ruin you completely." But Alara sat up, her gown falling around her curves, and took his face in her hands. "You didn't ruin me, Kale," she murmured, pressing her lips to his. "You freed me." That kiss turned into something deeper, darker. Her hand slid into his hair, pulling him back into the bed, her body pressing against his with boldness she had never known before. His resolve crumbled the moment her bare thigh draped over his hip. He groaned into her mouth, surrendering again, his hunger flaring as he rolled her beneath him. The sheets tangled, the world vanished, and soon they were lost in each other once more. Heat, sweat, breathless cries, the raw rhythm of forbidden lovers who knew every touch might be their last. Later, when the sun was high and the palace stirred with life, Kale slipped back into the shadows. His cloak swallowed him whole, yet his mind burned with the memory of her. He had been trained to fight with discipline, to kill without hesitation, but nothing in his warrior's code had prepared him for the sweetness of her body pressed against his, or the sound of her whispering his name as if it were sacred. He was supposed to be her guard. Instead, he had become her lover, her secret, her sin, and he could not stop craving more. Alara's day unfolded in a haze of longing. Courtiers and maids fussed over her as she prepared for her father's council, but all she could think of was the warmth of Kale's chest against hers, the way his lips had trailed down her skin with reverence and hunger. When she sat in the council hall, her gaze strayed again and again to the dark corners, where she imagined his shadowed figure watching her. Their love was a secret war, but to her it was worth every risk. That night, she found him again, this time in the palace library. The firelight flickered against the walls, casting his strong features into sharp relief. He was leaning against a table, scanning an old map, but when she entered, his eyes snapped to hers, filled with a heat that set her blood racing. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, though his hands already reached for her. Alara crossed the space between them, her gown swaying around her ankles, her eyes locked on his. "And yet here I am," she said softly, defiance and desire lacing her tone. He kissed her before another word could pass. It was harsher this time, raw with desperation. Her back hit the bookshelf, scrolls tumbling around them as his hands roamed down her sides. She gasped, clutching his shoulders as his lips claimed hers again and again, until her head spun. His mouth trailed lower, brushing the swell of her breasts, teasing until she whimpered. "Kale," she moaned, and the sound broke him. He lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist, and carried her to the heavy oak table. Their bodies tangled in a fever of passion, the scent of parchment and smoke surrounding them as they gave in once more, daring the gods themselves to stop them. Afterward, lying together in the golden glow of the fire, Alara traced circles on his chest, her heart pounding with both joy and dread. "How long can we keep living like this?" she whispered. Kale kissed the top of her head, his jaw tightening. As long as fate allows, he said, though deep inside, he knew fate was already moving against them. Because outside those walls, whispers were spreading. Rumors of a shadowed warrior too close to the princess, of stolen moments and glances that lingered too long. And fate, cruel as it always was preparing to test the bond they had forged in fire and desire. The palace halls glittered with golden light as servants dressed Alara in a gown of ivory lace, each stitch designed to impress the foreign prince who had come to claim her hand. The weight of the crown felt heavier than the jewels upon her neck. Her heart, however, beat not for duty, but for the man she could not have. Behind the mirrors and silken drapes, she saw only Kale, the hidden warrior who had touched her body, her soul, her very being. Every brush of fabric against her skin reminded her of his hands. Every whisper of perfume reminded her of his breath against her throat. When the council gathered to speak of alliances, Alara's gaze drifted toward the shadows. She knew he was there. Kale never revealed himself in such meetings, yet she could always feel him, his silent vow wrapping around her like armor. And when the foreign prince bowed, pressing a chaste kiss to her hand, all she could think of was Kale's mouth against her wrist, trailing upward, leaving marks only she could see in memory. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, knowing no crown, no marriage, no alliance could ever burn away what they had shared in secret. That night, she found him in the stables. He was brushing down a black stallion, his muscles tense, his jaw clenched, as if he had swallowed his rage. "They want me to marry him," she whispered, stepping into the lantern's glow. Kale froze, his hand tightening on the reins. Slowly, he turned, and his eyes met hers, wild and unsteady. "And what do you want?" he demanded, his voice low, almost feral. Alara closed the space between them, her fingers trembling as they slid up his chest. "You," she confessed. "Only you, even if it destroys me." That was all it took. His restraint shattered. In one swift movement, he pulled her against him, his mouth crushing hers in a kiss that stole her breath. She clung to him, her body arching against his as his hands roamed freely, no longer bound by fear. He lifted her effortlessly, setting her atop a hay-strewn bench, her gown spilling around them like water. His lips trailed down her throat, his teeth grazing lightly over her skin until she gasped, her fingers burying in his hair. "Tell me to stop," he growled against her breast, his voice shaking with hunger. "Never," she breathed, pulling him closer. What followed was fire. His hands tore at her gown, exposing skin that gleamed in the lantern light. Her legs wrapped around him, pulling him deeper, demanding more. Their cries mingled with the night, raw and unrestrained. As he claimed her over and over, each thrust a declaration, each kiss a vow. The world outside disappeared. No prince, no crown, no kingdom could touch them here. Only the two of them existed, bodies locked, souls entwined, hearts beating like drums of war. When at last they collapsed together, breathless and trembling, Kale held her close, his forehead pressed to hers. "You are not mine to keep," he whispered, though his arms refused to let her go. Alara touched his cheek, her eyes shining with tears and defiance. "Then let the world burn," she answered, "because I will never belong to anyone else." Their love had become more than forbidden. It had become unstoppable. A dangerous, intoxicating bond that would soon be tested not just by whispers of betrayal, but by the storm of war already rising on the horizon. Dawn crept across the horizon, spilling soft pink light into Alara's chamber. She sat on the edge of her bed, Kale's cloak draped over her bare shoulders, her skin still tingling from the fire they had shared. Her heart raced as if it still belonged in his chest, her lips swollen from his relentless kisses. She knew the risks, knew discovery would mean his death, but she no longer cared. He had become her oxygen. Without him, she could not breathe. Kale stood at her window, his silhouette outlined against the rising sun. His eyes were hard, his body tense, as if the weight of every oath and every sin was pressing down upon him at once. "If they find us, Alara," he murmured, his voice raw, "they will kill me, and they will cage you like a bird with broken wings." His words were meant to scare her, to make her turn away, but Alara only rose, her bare feet gliding across the floor until she stood before him. She placed her hands against his chest, feeling his heart thundering beneath her palms. "Then let them try," she whispered, "because I would rather die with you than live a lifetime without your touch." Her words destroyed what little restraint he had left. His mouth crashed against hers, their kiss desperate, hungry, as though it might be their last. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her back to the bed, his hands greedy, his body trembling with desire. The sheets tangled around them as his lips explored every inch of her skin, worshipping her like a goddess, devouring her like a man who had starved too long. Ilara gasped and moaned beneath him, her body arching, her nails scraping across his back as he drove her to the edge of madness again and again. Their cries filled the chamber, echoing like a hymn of sin and salvation, binding them in fire and sweat and love too dangerous to name. When the storm of their passion finally subsided, they lay entwined, breathless, their skin slick and glowing in the early light. Cale pressed a kiss to her hair, his voice breaking. "Every time I touch you, I know I am sealing my fate." Ilara lifted her head, her eyes fierce, her lips trembling. "Then seal it," she said. "Seal it again and again until the world understands that I was always yours." But the world was already watching. Rumors had grown louder, whispers carried by servants and spies. The king himself began to notice how his daughter's gaze lingered in the shadows, how her lips curved when she thought no one was watching. One evening, Cale was summoned before the throne. The great hall was empty save for the king, whose sharp eyes burned into him. "You are too close to my daughter," the king growled, his voice dripping with suspicion. "I see it in her smile, in her eyes. Forget her, warrior, or you will bleed for her." Cale bowed low, his face an iron mask, but inside his heart raged. Forget her? Impossible. Her scent was etched into his skin. Her moans haunted his dreams. Her love branded into his very soul. He left the hall with clenched fists, his body trembling with fury. When night fell, Ilara came to him in secret, slipping into his chamber like a flame in the dark. She saw the storm in his eyes, the way his jaw was tight with pain, and she knew at once. "He threatened you," she whispered. Cale said nothing, only pulled her into his arms, crushing his mouth to hers in a kiss that tasted of despair and devotion. Their clothes fell away quickly, torn by urgency, by fear, by the knowledge that tomorrow was uncertain. They made love with a desperation that bordered on madness, clinging to each other as though the world might end before morning. Every thrust, every kiss, every breath was a vow. "I am yours. You are mine. Nothing can break us." Her body quivered beneath his, her cries filling the room, while his whispered promises mingled with her name, spoken like prayer and curse. When they finally collapsed into each other's arms, their souls felt chained together, bound tighter than any crown or oath could ever hope to undo. But outside the chamber, beyond the fragile safety of tangled sheets and whispered vows, betrayal was already circling. Enemies lurked in shadows, waiting for the moment when love could be turned into weakness. And soon, Cale and Ilara would discover that the price of forbidden desire was blood. The kingdom was restless. Tension wound itself into every corner of the palace, and the air was heavy with whispers of war. Ilara could feel the shift, the servants' nervous glances, the hurried steps of the guards, the way her father's counsel lingered long into the night. Yet none of it frightened her as much as the possibility of losing Cale, her hidden warrior, her forbidden love. One evening, as she crossed the gardens under a moonlit sky, she felt the chill of danger. The roses shivered, though no wind blew. A shadow moved among the hedges. Before she could cry out, Cale appeared from the darkness, his blade flashing. Steel clashed in the night, the hiss of an assassin's dagger, the grunt of Cale's strength. Ilara screamed as Cale shoved her aside, the assassin's blade plunging deep into his shoulder. He bled, yet he fought like a beast, his eyes burning with fury. With one brutal strike, he sent the attacker sprawling, lifeless, among the roses. Ilara dropped to her knees beside him, her trembling hands pressing against his wound. "No, no, no, stay with me," she begged, her tears falling fast. Blood soaked through her fingers, warm and terrifying. But Cale only cupped her cheek, his lips curving into a weak smile. "If this is my end, at least I die knowing your love was mine." His words broke her heart, shattered her into pieces. She kissed him fiercely, tasting salt and iron, her sobs spilling into his mouth. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered between desperate kisses. "You swore to protect me, and I cannot breathe without you." Then something miraculous happened. As her tears slid onto his wound, they glowed with silver light. Heat surged through her body, an ancient power awakening in her veins. Cale gasped as the bleeding slowed, the torn flesh knitting itself beneath her touch. Ilara's eyes widened with shock, but Cale only stared at her in awe. You're not just a princess," he breathed. "You're Moonfire's heir." The revelation stole her breath. She had always felt different, but this power, was beyond imagination. And Cale, bleeding yet alive, was the first to witness it. Their fear turned into hunger. Overcome by relief and love, Ilara pulled him into her arms, their mouths colliding in a kiss that was desperate, messy, alive. He pushed her back against the marble wall of the garden, their bodies pressed tight, the taste of blood and tears mingling with passion. She wrapped her legs around him, clinging to him as if her body could anchor him to this world. His hands, though still trembling with pain, slid under her gown, lifting it higher, higher, until her moans filled the night once more. It was madness, making love in the garden in the aftermath of blood and death, but it was also salvation. Their cries rose to the stars, proof that even in the shadow of death, their love burned untamed. Afterward, Cale lay back against the roses, his arms still bandaged, but his strength slowly returning. Ilara curled against him, her head resting on his chest, listening to the thunder of his heartbeat. "You saved me," he whispered, kissing her hair. "Not just my body, Ilara. You saved my soul." She closed her eyes, her fingers drawing circles on his skin. "And I will keep saving you," she murmured, "over and over, until fate itself bows to us." But fate was not ready to bow. The assassin's death was only the beginning. By dawn, the council was in uproar, and rumors spread that someone wanted the princess silenced before her marriage. Some whispered of foreign plots. Others spoke of traitors within the palace. Cale, though still healing, refused to leave Ilara's side, his hand always on his blade, his eyes scanning every shadow. Yet he knew deep inside that their greatest enemy might not be the strangers beyond the walls, but the crown that ruled above them. The kingdom erupted into fire. By the time dawn broke, the palace bells tolled an alarm, summoning soldiers to their posts. Word had spread like poison. The assassin who had nearly killed Ilara was not acting alone. Armies from the Shadowlands marched toward the capital, and war was no longer a whisper. It was a storm pressing at the gates. Ilara stood on the balcony, her silk gown replaced by armor gilded with silver. Her power pulsed beneath her skin, restless and fierce. A secret she now understood belonged to her bloodline. The Moonfire gift. Cale fastened the last strap of her breastplate, his fingers brushing her skin, his gaze dark and burning. "You shouldn't be on the battlefield," he murmured. She turned to him, lifting his scarred hand to her lips. "And I shouldn't love you," she whispered back, "but I do. And I will fight by your side, Cale, or die beside you." That vow carried them into the fray. On the battlefield, their love became legend. Cale was a storm of steel, cutting down enemies with relentless fury, his every strike fueled by the need to protect the woman who owned his soul. Ilara fought like fire itself, her silver light blazing, shattering dark spells and burning through armor. Together, they were unstoppable, warrior and princess, protector and beloved, moving as if they were two halves of the same body. In the chaos of battle, there were moments when time slowed, when Cale's hand would brush hers as he spun to block an attack, when her power would flare to shield him from a blade. When their eyes would meet, even amid blood and screams, and everything else vanished. They were not just fighting for a kingdom. They were fighting for the right to love freely, to live fiercely, to claim each other against a world that wanted them apart. But war is merciless. As night fell, the Shadowlands army pushed harder, their dark sorcery bending the tide. Exhausted, Ilara and Kale were forced into the ruins of a temple, flames crackling around them. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, their bodies pressed together as they leaned against shattered stone. The danger outside should have kept them focused, but the fire inside them was impossible to silence. Kale gripped her waist, pulling her onto his lap, his armor scraping against hers. "If we die tonight," he growled, his lips devouring hers, "I want to die tasting you." She gasped, her body arching against him, their kisses wild and reckless. His hands roamed beneath her breastplate, sliding against the heat of her skin. She tore at his straps, desperate, needy, her mouth tracing the scars on his chest as if they were holy scripture. The war outside raged, but inside that ruined temple, the only sounds were their moans and the pounding of their hearts. They made love like warriors facing their last dawn, hungry, raw, unrestrained. Every thrust was a promise, every kiss a claim, every cry an act of defiance against the death clawing at their door. Ilara's silver light wrapped around them, glowing brighter with each climax, until the ruined temple blazed as if touched by the gods themselves. When they collapsed together, trembling and breathless, Kale pressed his forehead to hers. "If this is our end," he whispered hoarsely, "then know this. You are the only crown I will ever bow to." But it was not their end. At dawn, reinforcements from loyal kingdoms arrived, pushing the Shadowlands back. The tide of war shifted. Yet victory came at a price. Ilara's father, the king, was struck down in battle. His last words, carried to her on bloodied lips, were chilling. "Trust no one even within your walls." Now the throne was empty, the kingdom bleeding, and enemies still lurking in the shadows. Ilara Moonfire's heir was destined to rule. And by her side stood Kale, scarred and fierce, the warrior who had not only protected her, but claimed her, body and soul. But destiny was not done testing them, for the crown demanded sacrifice. And soon, both would be forced to choose between love and power, or risk losing everything. The palace walls felt colder than the battlefield. After the war's end, victory tasted bitter. Ilara stood in the throne room, the crown heavy in her hands, her father's blood still fresh in her memory. Kale stood behind her, silent, his presence steady, but his eyes wary. For even here, in the heart of her kingdom, danger prowled. The council gathered around, faces etched with grief and suspicion. Some bowed to Ilara, others glared with thinly veiled resentment. Whispers coiled like snakes, a warrior at the princess's side, a lover unworthy of the throne. They feared Kale. They feared her power. And as her father had warned, betrayal was closer than she imagined. It came during the coronation itself. As the crown touched her brow, a dagger flashed from among the council. Ilara gasped, but Kale was faster, his body slamming into hers, the blade slicing across his side instead of her heart. He fell to his knees, blood spilling, his face pale, but his hand clutching hers with unyielding strength. "No crown, no kingdom is worth more than you," he rasped. Rage and grief exploded inside her. Silver fire burst from her body, sweeping through the throne room. The traitor screamed as flames consumed him, leaving only ashes at her feet. The rest of the council fell silent, eyes wide with terror. Ilara stood tall, Kale's blood on her hands, her power blazing around her. "This kingdom will not be ruled by fear," she declared, her voice trembling but fierce. "It will be ruled by love." She dropped to her knees beside Kale, her tears mingling with his blood. Her gift flared again, pouring into his wound, knitting torn flesh. He gasped, color rushing back to his cheeks, as he opened his eyes to find her staring down at him. broken yet burning with devotion. "Ilara," he whispered, "you could have been a queen without me." She kissed him hard, silencing him, her tears wetting both their lips. "And you could have been a warrior without me. But I don't want crowns or swords. I want you." The palace trembled with her words. That night, Ilara was crowned queen of Moonfire, Kale at her side, not as a shadow, but as her chosen consort. Together, they faced a kingdom still healing, still wary, but bound by the undeniable truth that love, fierce, wild, and unbreakable, was the most powerful weapon of all. Their story was carved into legend. Songs would speak of the queen whose tears burned brighter than fire, and the warrior who defied death itself to hold her. Yet in the quiet of their chambers, away from eyes and crowns, they were not legends. They were simply lovers, tangled in sheets, whispering promises into the night. Their kisses were softer now, their love deeper, their passion still as wild as the first night in the shadows. And in the silence after, as Kale held her against his scarred chest, Ilara finally felt a peace. "Protect the princess," he whispered, with a smile that only she would ever see. "You were never the one who needed protecting. You were always the one saving me." And so, love became their throne, their shield, their fire. A fire that would never die. And that, my beautiful hearts, is the end of Protect the Princess, the Hidden Warrior. A story of forbidden passion, battles fought in fire and blood, and a love so wild it defied destiny itself.